Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is John McNally and I'm the chairman of the Portrush Heritage Group. Welcome to the first Heritage Evening of 2023. Tonight's programme has been live streamed, and I know the last time we streamed we had viewers across Northern Ireland, England, Scotland and as far away as the US. So to those watching from here, near and far, we wish you all a very healthy, happy and peaceful 2023. You're all indeed most welcome, and we thank you for your presence. We have a special welcome this evening for our speakers, BBC Radio Ulster presenter Marie McAleese and photographer historian Kenneth Wood. You are both very welcome. Thank you for coming along. The Antro Suite this evening where we're in is looking more like a television studio than perhaps an extension of a restaurant or whatever, but we are very fortunate to have Stuart Cullen and Mervyn Mackay at the digital helm, and I'd like to thank you guys for setting all this up. Having said that, we are aware that YouTube have in the past blocked presentations on copyright grounds that use certain music. And we know that Ken's videos have music tracks, but they are already on YouTube. So we are assuming, fingers crossed, that there are no copyright issues. However, should the transmission of Ken's talk be blocked, we will later provide an email and a link for those watching online where you can follow and have a look at Ken's presentation. I am this evening deputizing for the regular Heritage Evening chair. And I have a page here written, which I'm not going to bother with because he's actually here this evening. And I am so delighted to see him. Canon John, you are most welcome. Thank you for coming. Would you just like to say a couple of words, just maybe advice to me or something like that, whatever?
John, I'd hesitate to give you any advice. You run the show. But I simply want to say thank you for the many good wishes I've received since I had my 75th birthday on the 17th of October, and on the 18th of October I had an operation for bowel cancer. 12 days later I had a life-saving operation because the bowel split, and I was told afterwards a 50-50 chance that I would survive. But I didn't know that till after I came out, so I was glad it was the correct 50%. And it was 25 days in hospital. I've just, now I've been informed that there's liver cancer in my liver, and I start chemo next Tuesday. So I've been grateful. I'm trying to do as much as possible to keep going. I'm not going to let the cancer defeat me. I want to defeat it. And part of that is to be out. This is the first public meeting I've been to since I came out of hospital in November. So it's lovely to be with you. And I'm delighted, especially with Anne-Marie, giving her presentation tonight. But thanks to you all for the so many messages of support and encouragement that I've received. Thank you very much, and thank you to John.
Thank you, John. We applaud your courage, strength and faith. You are showing us, and we will take inspiration from it. So we'll be with you. There's a raffle on tonight this evening, and there are prizes, and I've no doubt the ladies will have been round on that. So to our first speaker this evening, she and I I've had the pleasure of being interviewed by her, and it is the most relaxing thing you could ever imagine. She's so laid back, it's unbelievable, but there we are. Anne-Marie, she was to be accompanied by Dot Blakely, who Anne-Marie describes as being sort of tougher than anything that goes. But Dot, unfortunately, is laid up with the winter flu. There's a lovely piece about Anne-Marie that I found on the website. In fact, I later found out the Belfast Telegraph had written it back in 2016. But I'm going to read it anyway because I think it's still relevant. It says, the ubiquitous Marie McAleese doesn't need any sat-nav device or maps to guide her around the highways and byways of Northern Ireland. You could blindfold the popular BBC Radio Ulster presenter and leave her off on the remotest part of the province, and she'd probably immediately recognize it. For it's over 30 years since the first airing of the programme that has managed to make anything from sheep farming to shipwrecks, architecture to archery sound fascinating in reports the more mainstream broadcasters wouldn't touch. Because there's hardly anywhere, be it your place or mine, that Anne-Marie hasn't visited on her quest for stories for her Saturday morning programmes. Well, those visits and her meeting with Dot Blakely have resulted in the publishing of her book, Homebirds. Anne-Marie, we would love to hear about the journey that you and Dot made to bring the book to print. The stage is yours. Okay.
Well, my goodness, thank you very much. I was wondering there, had I written that for the Belfast, but I don't think I did there at all. But before I begin, can I just say, from the heart, John McKegney, it is so good, and I had no idea that you were going to be here tonight. So you're now my favourite John in the room. Usually that goes to Mr. McNally there, but I think for one night only, he'd be happy to let that go. So you'll continue to be in our thoughts and prayers, John, as you have been for some months now. So John McNally, thank you very much as ever for the kind invitation. And what John said that I was intimating about Dot Blakely, in the more than 20 years that I've known her, is made of Teflon, without a shadow of a doubt. Probably a bit like some of the frying pans they sell up the road there in the White House. So it's just so unlike her not to make a date that she was so looking forward to. Because when John asked me and I said, would Dot come as well? And he said, oh, that'd be great. And she was delighted because Dot would go the length and breadth of the country. So she has a cough that she can't get rid of, and when she starts to talk, she coughs, and she can't stop coughing, and that's why. So she's on antibiotics just the last couple of days. So she sends her apologies, but maybe we might even be invited back for part two. You never know, at another time in the year. So anyway, Dot sends her very best wishes, as we do to her. Funnily enough, that when I was thinking, because it's been a funny couple of weeks with one thing and another, and when I was planning this about half an hour before I left the house, I found my bird notebook, which I was given whenever I first mooted the idea of writing a book, and it had all kinds of things in it. It had the one chapter that I sent to my dad, Morris, who's in the front row there, because when you read the book, you'll see that it's very much part memoir, as well as the birds, which Dot kept me right on. So there's a whole chapter about McGilligan and my granny McAleese, who people will maybe remember from B&B houses on Causeway Street. Some special quotes or epigraphs, as I came to discover that's what they were called, quotes at the beginning and the end of chapters, and that's the one that 𝗪𝘂 McAleese wrote. And I had to go around all the McAleeses for fear of a family feud. So there's 2 or 3 of them in there. So, in truth, I suppose I'd talked with Blackstaff on and off for a few years about a book because, as John kindly mentioned, 30 plus years traversing the highways and byways of Northern Ireland. Obviously, I started when I was about 12 on a youth experience programme. But, so I racked up a lot of stories, and they'd said to me about maybe putting a book together. And then COVID hit. So that was 2020, and I started to think, and immediately everything stopped, as it did for everybody. So Dot and I could no longer, ironically, meet up anymore in the places that we used to go to watch the birds, hear the birds, and for her to explain what the birds were to me. So then I started to think, got in touch with Blackstaff, said, what about this? Dot and I have been going here, there, and everywhere for 20 years. And they liked it, and I said, Dot, I need you to make sure that I remember the right birds in the right places in the right counties at the right times of the year, because Dot, by her own admission, is not a writer, does not like to write. So I said, you keep me writing the birds and I'll do the word bits. So that's more or less what we did. And then we thought we better divide it up into seasons and counties. So you'll see that it's in spring, summer, autumn and winter, with about maybe 10 chapters in each. So obviously the birds appear at different times of the year. I'm just looking at, because I'll give you a nod whenever we get to some of the photographs, but in terms of where I am tonight, and then we'll get into the book, I think it's quite appropriate because the very first words I think I write are my first real bird memory is of going with my dad to see the seagulls flocking around Lansdowne and Ramore Head in Portrush. I was pretty young, probably smaller than the seagulls, but my enthusiasm for these wonderful birds stayed with me. What I couldn't put in that, because for health and safety reasons, and my editor at Blackstaff took it out, was that I actually used to be on Daddy's knee and he was teaching me how to drive when I was about 3, going around the car park. I forgot to tell you that, Dad. And Patsy, the editor in Blackstaff, said, no, you can't put that in case somebody comes after you or me. So but that is a very vivid memory in my mind. The seagulls were probably twice the size I was. But it wasn't until I met Dot many years later that my enthusiasm for birds really began to take off. And I still don't, I can pick out the way all of you can, a blackbird and a robin. I could do maybe a bit more than that now, but she's great with all the songs and all the calls, and she knows, she just, shh, there's a jay, or there's a tree creeper, or there's a whatever it might be. I try, but as you'll see when you read this book, I'm not an expert by any means, but what I did learn to appreciate more and more, and I think when the world was quiet and silent, as it was so unusually 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, that we all began to hear the birds, to notice the birds, to look at the birds. So I think, ironically, that was maybe the time for me to start to commit to memory. And then, as I said, it became memoir, and I would say to Dot, and we were doing things over email and by video call, and she would say, do you remember the day we went to Gorge and Glen Forest Park? And I would say, oh, Guy, that's the day we got lost, even though we never get lost, we do get lost. Yeah. And there's a funny chapter in it where literally Dot is watching me go all around the houses, and she's getting directions from a man from a different part of County Tyrone, and I'm thinking, is that Dot? Did I just pass Dot there? But we ended up in the right place at the right time. But so it's very much about places as well as about birds and the birds in their places, but it's also just about that deep appreciation of nature that I think all of us have become more and more aware of. And really, when you think about it, birds are very, very, very impressive, because one of the things I do say, their inbuilt communication system would be the envy of NASA. Morning, noon and night, in an impressive array of calls, squeaks, tweets, twits, coos, chirps, chits, chacks, teaks, ticks and tacks, they conduct their business efficiently and with gusto. And it is a phenomenon that at precisely the same time of the year, thousands of birds throughout the world instinctively leave their home place. 30,000 of them come to us in September, October, to the shores of Strangford Lough, called by the allure of the food. And they have no navigation tools whatsoever, but they're in search of sunnier climes where the living is easy. And their dazzling display of courtship displays, that's so impressive as well. Talented singers, they can charm the bird that takes their fancy out of the tree and into their wings. So that it's kind of a love affair with birds via Dot, and a love affair with nature. So we had the idea in August 2020. Dot said, yeah, I'll help you with the birds. Got in touch with the publishers and they agreed. I was writing a few chapters in between. They agreed in February, the day after my birthday, February 2021. And then the book I finished writing it in August, September in 21, and then took about a year between one thing and another. So it just came out just before Christmas there, between one thing and another. Things take a wee bit of time. But I think I should mention the photographs, because some of the photographs, and I know you can really see, it's the very first one, Cygnets at Ballyness. It's beside the spring place. There they are. Aren't they cute? This is the start of the spring chapter. And they are two little cygnets who live at Ballyness Caravan Park, just in the outskirts of Bushmills. And Dot and I, as part of the radio programme, followed the life and times of a family of 2 swans, and this particular year 6 cygnets. And we went back and forth just after they were born, whenever they were at flight school, as we christened it, whenever they were splashing about on the water and trying to take off. and when they were learning how to feed, and when the parents were getting a bit cranky with us sometimes if we got too close. But Dot is very good. Dot is the Dr. Dolittle. She knows all bird language. And even the next one, after that, the grey-lag goose, and that's the jackdaw. That's at the beginning of a chapter called Jack and Gulls in Ballycastle, because funnily enough, and I know she's not here, but she wouldn't disagree with me, the only bird that Dot is not keen on is seagull. The seagull, and it's the one that I fell in love with first, just across the road. So we agreed to disagree in that. But I made this the first chapter because we've been to Ballycastle many times and we've been to Rathline many times looking for birds. But this particular boy, that's not him. Well, I think it actually is him. But we were sitting, because Dot never goes anywhere without Terry, her husband. Terry loves Dot and cars, and he drives her everywhere. And they always have a picnic. So we would sometimes have a picnic and sandwiches and tea and coffee afterwards. And we were talking about the seagulls in Ballycastle. And all of a sudden, this boy, this jackdaw, was just hovering about the place. And all of a sudden, he lands on Dot's shoulder and talks, as I say in the book, they talk about bird things in a language that I'm not quite familiar with. But that is him, because one of the Richard and Val, their friends, were there as well that day. You'll see all of this in the book, but that is the jackdaw. And I mean, the book is just full of, if you even go through to the next few, here are my seagulls. But every other page, there are over 150 photographs of birds, all taken by amateur ornithologists, keen birders, who we are eternally in their debt for. I'll not mention all their names, but their names are all credited in the book. And I think that was one of the biggest selling points in terms of getting the commission for the book. Because, and you know, I make no distinction between professional and amateur photographers, because I think they're stunning. So that is the black-headed gull, the lesser black-headed gull, and the herring gull. I thought I had captions in that, but anyway. And then there's the common gull, and the biggest gull of all, which Dot calls the big beast, and it's the one at the bottom, the greater black-backed gull, and apparently it's the size of a small Alsatian. So you won't see those, hopefully, very often. I don't think they would be at Dromore Head. But the chapter on Bushmills, if you go ahead, actually, Stuart, to the next one. Yeah, there's the little family. And you can recognise some of the caravans there at Ballyness. Very, very clever swans. And the way they taught them, and we were fairly close to them. And there was one wee small cygnet. You can see there's only 4, there were 5, and Dot was always very worried about the wee runt of the litter, because one day we were there and she was like, and she couldn't see the 5th one. And I was there, and there was a moment of silence, and she said, oh, there he is. Because sometimes he wasn't as feisty maybe as he should have been, you know, a bit like dogs and cats and that kind of thing. But he did survive, and he did take flight. And as soon as they're big enough to do that, the mum and dad, the cob and the pen, the male and the female swan, will get rid of them, because it's territory, as far as I know, and they send the young ones off, or the teenagers off, and then the circle of life begins again. So that is, because I sort of thought I should maybe concentrate on the chapters closer to home, and it was funny. One of the hardest things we had to do was to come up with a title for the book, which we ended up with Homebirds, which feels so natural now, but at the time it was the hardest thing. And I wanted to call it Your Birds and Mine, with a little play. But guess what mistake I made? Asking somebody in the BBC if I could call it Your Birds and Mine, so they said no. So Homebirds, we got there in the end. But then the chapters were kind of named by the memories. There's a chapter called Dancing Hawks in Coconut Lane, and that's all about an old lane in Portstewart, Ackerton Lane, and it's behind where the house that I bought when I moved back to Portstewart, first of all, 10 or 11 years ago. And it's the little lane at the back, if you know, just opposite the Cremore pathway, and you would go down, it would take you to the GAA hall. And there was a group of, at the time I didn't know, but there was a whole lot of these big burly birds that I thought, are they eagles? What are they? I don't know. Like, I was ringing Dot and said, Dot, you've got to come and tell me what these birds are. And it turned out they were known as dancing hawks, but they just lost me. Page 79. because, and they were incredible. And I christened them, I christened the wee lane Coconut Lane because at this particular time of the year it was summertime and the smell of the wind bushes was so coconutty, so I call it Coconut Lane. But they were buzzards, even though I like to think of them as Portrush eagles, but their nickname is Dancing Hawks. But they have burly legs and they reminded me of all kinds of rugby teams, and Dot came down and looked, and you know, that's a lovely chapter. And the other thing, as I say, that we did was ask people would they give us their thoughts on birds, and the amount of people that love birds and watch birds and enjoy birds is just incredible. So we got a great selection of quotes. This one, what a wonderful way to start the day. One very cute little blue tit perched on the windowsill looking in as if to say good morning, and then almost every day at lunchtime a blackbird having his daily dip in the bird bath. Isn't nature truly wonderful? And that was from a very reluctant Thelma McAleese whenever I asked her would she, because I knew that she watched the birds every morning whenever you were having your breakfast and put out food and all the rest of it. And it just, if you flick through any of the photographs, but you can see the quality of them, and those, just keep going. Oh, that one is a good one, sorry. That is the waterworks, and that's a coot. See the big one with the big wings, and that's the waterworks in Belfast. So we go beyond. They're in each county, every single county. We even went to Glenveigh National Park, which if you've never been to, I had never been to before this, but we wanted to include every county in Ulster. So we went to Donegal in search of the golden eagle, and that's the one place in this part of the island that you would see. We didn't see it that day, but there are definitely golden eagles there and golden eagle chicks, and a very successful conservation plan. Dot had been there 20 odd years before, so there's a nice chapter about that, and some great photographs of kestrels and golden eagles as well. So there's a couple of chapters about Port Stewart, because Dot came back the day that we were looking at the buzzards, the dancing hawks. It poured, so we had to run for cover, and I said, Dot, come back again. So she came back in the summertime, and we looked for sand martins and sandpipers, and I treated her to an ice cream on the prom, I think. And rathlin as well, some fantastic photographs of puffins, and Dot knows rathlin like the back of her hand. Fulmars, kittiwakes, razorbills, and she's just got a great way, and I think that comes through in every page of the book. She's just got a great way of making everything very accessible. It's not an ornithological academic book by any means whatsoever, but it is, I mean, on occasions, like for instance on page 200, I don't know if you can scroll as far as that. You know, sometimes I look at this book and I think, I don't even remember writing this. And I can't believe that there are 200 pages in it, but there's more than that, actually. But there was a great, the Ravens of 𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗆𝘆 is what I call this, because she said, you don't remember when we were up at 𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗆𝘆, and I was telling you that last year there was a kestrel family and a peregrine falcon, and the kestrel had a fight with the falcon, and then they fell out, and then the kestrel hurt its leg, and the way she tells these stories, and then the raven family moved in. So that kind of gives me an idea and then I developed a sort of a whole story about the Raven family and how they took over, and Mr. Raven was out shopping and he found this rabbit for the lunch and he brought the rabbit. So you'll see that on page 200, look for that. But it is fascinating, and exactly with that, where that quarry is very dramatic, because some of the film Dracula Untold was filmed there. So the big cliffs, the same as the sea stacks on Rathlin, are so dramatic, and they lend themselves to great photographs. And when you put a call out the way Blackstaff did for photographs, you end up getting a great selection, which is what we did. So some of the tales become a little family stories. Some of them are my family story. Some of them are the bird family stories, or the Rathlin stories. But every county, or there's a lovely one about the Gorchin Glen in Tyrone and the fairy tales. And anyway, I think my imagination sometimes took flight, if you'll pardon the pun, on occasions. But what we hope is that we've provided, you know, as I suppose a starting point, because Blackstaff were quite keen that we put together some tips, and then the two of us sat down, you know, in terms of how to get started, where should I go, what's the best time of the year to begin, what will I need. So we did that because we had naturally done all of that, because there's a pair of binoculars in my car yet in the boot that Dot insisted that I buy years and years and years ago. Now, I see, for a long time I was like that, and Dot said, can you see it? And I'd go, I can't see it. Binoculars are quite hard. They really are quite hard to use. But once you get your eye in, then it does make all the difference. So I think we have a lot of thanks from both of us. We have to thank the photographers, I think, first and foremost, and Dot for her patience with my constant emails and constant questions about where were we and what are these birds, and has that one got a blue stripe or a black stripe or a white stripe or what a stripe. So, you know, all of that. So I have to thank Dot very much. Black staff, particularly Jackie Hawkes and Patsy Horton, and all the people who offered the quotes and the epigraphs, and one particular man who's in the front row, Marie McAleese, and page 38 is by far the best page, because there is a beautiful poem, and I've always admired this of Dad's, always, long before this book was ever thought of. It's called Night Flight. Fold your tired wings and go to sleep, little bird, and the night wind will carry you home across the dark ocean on his strong wings. You still have miles to go, but you can sleep now and dream of golden shores, and in the morning I will listen to your song of praise, little bird, outside my window. I think he might be right. That might be the best, although don't tell Thelma that, whatever you do. That might be one of the best. So for Dad and Mum, always their constant support, I'm indebted to them. And the great places, in fairness, and I give credit to them, that I have been lucky enough to visit. And in fairness, John is right, there are not very, very many places that I haven't been to. And I've been blessed to be over 30 counting years, actually, because I see Ken Bruce is retiring, and somebody said, I mean, he's been there for 30 years. And I'm thinking, that means I've been there for 33 years or something. I don't know. So I'm not even, I've stopped counting now anyway. But yeah, I'll leave you with, well, a couple of final thoughts, because I do remember in the days when I was on the road. I'm not on the road as much anymore now, because since COVID I haven't even been in a radio studio for 2.5 years, because they sent a wee mini studio to the house. So, and the price of petrol, I said to myself, just as well. But I remember going to the deepest, darkest parts of Fermanagh one time, and in the days whenever I had a producer who was very keen on health and safety forms, and you couldn't get out the door without filling in 6 forms to say you were going here and going there, and this might happen and that might happen. So I was running away from her to avoid having to do any paperwork. On that day I wish I had, because I remember I had never been to this place before. It was, funny enough, called Big Dog Forest, and I rang the man. I said, look, I'm not sure where I am. And he said, look, are you at the forest? And I said, yeah, I'm at the entrance to the forest. He said, go through the forest. Keep on going. You'll get no phone signal there, but I'll be the man in the white van in the lay-by at the end of the forest with the back doors open, so I'll see you then. I put the phone down and thought, am I crazy? Nobody knows where I am. Nobody knows where I am going to. Nobody even knows what store. So afterwards I looked at that producer and I thought, okay, I think I'll fill it. But it was all okay, obviously, there and then. But listen, thank you for turning out tonight. I know you're going to have a great chat from Kenneth. So enjoy that. And I will be talking to Kenneth actually on the radio. Well, we're recording it this week. It'll go out in a couple of weeks' time. I'll let John know who'll send the word. But I'll leave you with the notion, if you are interested in the book. And this is an anonymous poet, again, that Daddy put me in the direction of. Have you leant upon a gate without a need for words, to take in nature's wonder and to listen to the birds? Yes, leaning on a gate is a thing we ought to do. It helps us to unwind, and such moments are so few. Thank you very much. Thank you, John. I think that is comfortable.
Okay.
As long as I'm not talking.
All right, okay. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And looking back to all the days of promoting Pirates of Portrush and Raft Race and everything else, thank you for all your promotion of Portrush as well. So moving on to our Anne-Marie's book, as she already said, is on sale this evening. Our second speaker this evening is Kenneth Wood. Kenneth has only had a few days to prepare because Dot and Anne-Marie were going to do a two-hander. Kenneth had sent me an email about a few days earlier. He said, John, anytime you're thinking that you might need someone to speak, give me a call. I don't think he expected it quite as quick, but he jumped in and he's been absolutely amazing. Kenneth is a retired history teacher who hails from Lincolnshire. His association with this part of Northern Ireland goes back to 1970, when he met and fell in love with a Coleraine girl who would become his wife. On checking our records, I discovered that almost exactly 4 years ago, actually on the 16th of January 2019, Kenneth gave us a talk on his passion for photographing places that we may have visited but perhaps not have seen the way he sees them through a camera lens. Kenneth continues to take amazing still photographs. This one of the Arcadia perhaps is something that you might not normally see. No prizes for guessing that location. Also his calendar. Now that one's an interesting photograph. No doubt you maybe tell us a wee bit something more about the technique. How long was the exposure?
That was 20 seconds.
20 seconds exposure, right? He has also generously donated as a raffle prize his calendar, which has further examples of his beautiful photographs. This one, Ron Kerry?
So there is Portrush looking out towards Runkerry.
Right. Beautiful photograph. Well, Kenneth's passion for photography has moved on to video. And in this regard, he joined with George Pafilis. Pafilis, is that correct? Pafilis, okay. To create an amazing series of videos to catalogue their journey along the Causeway Coast. They used drones to take us places we have never been before, or perhaps been there but never seen from this viewpoint. Kenneth's background and history comes through in his commentary on the places visited in the video journey. Kenneth, thank you for your willing offer to present. We look forward to seeing your amazing videos.
Good evening, everybody. This kind of reminds me of my teaching career. When you came into school thinking that you got a free lesson and somebody was ill and you stood in for them, and you stood in for them for the hour to teach the class, no matter what it might be, no matter what subject. Sometimes you got lucky and you knew a bit about it and the class was brilliant. Sometimes it was more challenging. I'm hoping that tonight will not be challenging. Okay, right, so if we could begin, thank you, Stuart. In 2016, a good friend here, Mark Rogers from 𝗪𝗓𝗪𝗔 Kingdom Tours, I'd arranged to meet with Mark to show him 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗆, which is quite challenging to get into. And I know that somebody else has been down into 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗆 and somebody else over their house. I don't know if anybody could add to that, but it is quite difficult. And Mark brought along a chap called George, who I didn't know. And immediately, the sort of a beginning of a very good friendship. George, a superb photographer, even better perhaps at his use of video. He is astonishingly good. My photography journey had been going on for donkey's years. I can remember when Shirley and I would come back from England to Coleraine for a couple of weeks in the summer. You know what Northern Irish girls are like, and their mums, coming back to see her mum, and we'd have an old film camera, out we'd go, and we'd take 24 or 36 shots and send them off to Belmont, and then they would come back and you'd have a look and you think, oh. We weren't quite as bad as my mum, because my mum, she actually used to cut out photographs of herself that she didn't like. And I remember when she died, going through old photographs, and there would be bits missing and such, well, she'd cut herself out of them. But photography has certainly changed and developed over the years. And most of us here, I'm sure, if you have a mobile phone, the technology that actually has gone into a mobile phone these days, and how people take photographs with them. I know that there's an advocate, Morris, he's snap happy with his mobile phone. How many shots a week do you take, Morris?
How many shots?
A week? Yeah, you're forever taking them, aren't you? I must admit, I use my mobile phone for making phone calls with, and not really for taking shots with, but that's just my preference. But photography really has moved on enormously. And if we move on, Stuart. So, September 2021. George and I were out taking photographs, and we started to talk about this idea of maybe putting together our own YouTube channel, in which we would try to highlight and showcase this stunning part of the world. We're both blow-ins, as John said. I'm a Lincolnshire blow-in. George is from Athens. He's actually there at the moment because his father's not too well. Otherwise, you'd have had the more handsome one standing in front talking to you. And we decided to put together our own YouTube channel. And we got all the camera gear. At that stage, we didn't have a drone. We had a gimbal, and a gimbal is a device where you can attach a camera to it, and as you walk along, it keeps the camera level. So basically, the horizon is level, and you can use it to get down really quite low. Lots of wonderful uses to that. We then decided to add to it. We got a GoPro, which is a camera that's about the size of 2 matchboxes put together, and you can shoot underwater with that. And in one of the videos, you will actually see us using the GoPro underwater at the 𝗂𝘀𝗆𝗄𝗏 Caves. And then we invested in some wireless microphones, and those you can be up to about 800 yards away from where you're talking, and it picks you up. Which I quite appreciate, because I think I look better at that distance than I do so very close up. So we decided to move forward. Now, over the years, I'm out and about virtually every day with a camera. John contacted me by email yesterday morning and sort of asked me where I was. And where was I? I was out for 5 hours in all that snow yesterday, taking shots. I can't remember seeing Curran Strand covered in snow. Yesterday it was, so I shot that. I went up to Macrocross, the viewing platforms, and got absolutely perished there. I then went onto the causeway to go down to the stones, because I've never seen the stones covered in snow, and they weren't yesterday. And then I thought, where else can I go to? And those people that can remember me when I was the tutor at Camera Club, they used to take the mickey out of me all the time about my love for 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏. So I went to 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏, and I went down to the sandy port there, the hidden beach, the secret beach, whatever you want to call it. And there was me, 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏, myself, and I were there. There was nobody else. I had it all to myself, and it was splendid. It turned really cold though, and you could see the snow and the hail coming in. And walking back, it was almost like you were being flayed with the hail hitting you. So we knew the places to go. What happens at certain times of the year? Elephant Rock between 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏 and White Park Bay. Now I know exactly when the sun will set through the hole in Elephant Rock. It does it twice a year at the equinoxes. And one of the videos we have on the channel shows how we go there and we're keeping our fingers crossed and we get lucky because the cloud doesn't stop the sun shining through. Mussenden Temple. Now the old bishop, I don't know if he knew this, but the 2 windows at Mussenden Temple, the same at the equinox, the sun sets through both of those windows. So if you position yourself, you get this sun star burst right through those 2 windows. So you learn things about the coast, and I've got an insatiable appetite for folklore. I really have. And talking to people when I first came over in 1970 and remembering things, and I absolutely adore and love old books and to read about things. 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏. People say, where's 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏? Well, I found out that 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏 is if you go to 𝗵𝗁𝗂𝗏 and walk around towards Elephant Rock, the first of the bays there, past the White Cottage, where there's the stack that's called Katie Stack, that is 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏. And its name comes from the fact that local people there used to dig up lugworms to use as bait for fishing. And I sort of, remember these things and keep them with me. And we try to add them into the videos. So if the list is back there, Stuart. Okay, so that first video, the elephant in the room, it's the first one that we did. There are 18 there now. If you have access to YouTube, and I know that John has sent lots of them out to people, and I hope that people have enjoyed watching them, then it would really help what we're trying to do if you would like them and if you would subscribe to our channel, because that will add to what we're trying to do as blow-ins, both of us, to showcase this wonderful part of the world. Now, what we'll do now, we'll have a look at some of the stuff in terms of the photography and the journey that we've made. So, the first one, please, Stuart. That is inside 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Cave. And there's a couple of villains. One on the left is George, and here's Mark Rogers from 𝗛𝗏𝗄𝗏𝗃𝗍𝗄𝗏 Kingdom And you have to be careful going in there with the tides and such. And I remember, Mark, we put some kelp down, didn't we?
That's right, yeah.
Yes. You see where the light is coming through? You can climb over, it's almost like a wall there. Each time I do, I always put my foot in a great big pool of water, without fail. But we were inside and took some shots inside, and we put some kelp down because the tide was coming in, so we knew that when the tide reached the kelp, we had to get out. Otherwise, we were going to end up with the 𝗛𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. It's the hermit of 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏 Cave. So that's where the journey began in 2016.
Sorry,
Okay.
what is the name?
𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, if you think of the causeway, and if you walk back from the causeway towards Port Ballantrae around Runkerry, 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏 is the first of the bays there. It means the narrow port. It's the one where there's the RAF monument at the top of it. It's quite boggy getting down. There are lots of boulders at the bottom of it, but with careful negotiation, you can get inside the cave and have a look. There's graffiti in there that goes back to the 1800s. In the days before the Giant's Causeway became the tourist place that we know now, when that started, the first guides at the causeway would be in 𝗵𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, which is the port of the cows, the first of the ports as you go down towards the stones, and they would row people out to go around to the causeway because there was no road as such down there. Mark can tell you all about this at great length, about how the roads developed, but they would row people around to 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. There'd be a guide inside with a pistol, and as they rowed them in, the pistol would be fired and it would echo. It would really sound very, very loud, frighten the daylights out of the... Can you have daylights inside a cave? Possibly. To frighten the daylights out of the people, and then the chap that fired the gun would have a net there for the tourists to drop money into. But that's where 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is. It's quite creepy down there in the evening.
I've never heard the name before, thank you.
Yeah, it's very creepy doing night photography down there, in total darkness, and the noises you hear, and you can hear some of the rocks moving when the water comes in. It is quite scary, but equally being down on the causeway, which I often do, I get down there at night to do night photography, and again it's just me, myself and I, and you can hear the waves and such, and sometimes you hear a noise and you jump and you look around and think, is there really somebody there? There's not, but it can be a bit frightening. Okay, Stuart, next one. So this is how we started out. We're both very keen of night photography. This was in the days when you could go down beneath Dunluce before they put the gate and everything up there. And that was one of the earliest shots we took down there with the stars above. And that's George standing there with my green torch lighting up. At the time, I thought that was the best photograph I'd ever taken. I look at it now and I think it's not. I suppose the more you take and the more self-critical you become of your own work. But again, you can see we were trying to do something that's a wee bit different. Okay, Stuart? And this is how it's progressed. Last March, John asked me the other day, how do I know when things are going to happen and such? Well, mobile phones are brilliant because there are so many apps on them, and one of the apps I have is for Northern Lights alerts. And that can tell me if there's an opportunity to see the Northern Lights. And at the beginning of March last year, this occurred. So George, myself and another chap, we went to Mussenden. That took 3 hours for that photograph. Camera on a tripod and everything set up to go. And it takes one photograph after the other. And then you take the photographs and you stack them on top of one another and you get that star trails effect. And if you see at the back there, Northern Lights, and I think the word is 𝗖𝘂𝘀𝗆𝗆𝗄𝗏, is that the correct, if my memory is good? That's me standing with a torch to give it some kind of, I don't know, difference. So our photography developed, and obviously we now think we're quite competent. Stuart, please. And getting shots like this. This wasn't yesterday, this was just last February. And I tend to wake early, pulled the curtains in my bedroom and saw there was snow. So I got out immediately and I drove up close to Dunluce and I captured that. But before things changed that day. Again, I'm quite happy with it. It's in this year's calendar, so I approve of that one. Okay, Stuart. And that's that opportunity I told you about. If from 𝗂𝗂𝗄𝗏 you walk around towards Elephant Rock, over that boggy section, and if you're very lucky, the equinox in March and the equinox in October, September, get it right, Wood, that's when that happens. And the sun actually sets through the hole in Elephant Rock. On one occasion there, in July, I got a photograph that astonished me. I'd gone down there, and you know what coasteers are, these people that climb up and jump off cliffs? Yeah. There was a chap from Port Ballantrae with 2 friends, and he actually climbed to the top of Elephant Rock and ran and jumped off. And I had the camera set on multiple exposures, and I captured him coming down. And then he swam in and said, "Did you get that?" He said, "Yeah." And I said to him, "Sure, when you're up there, isn't it frightening?" He said, "Yeah, but once you go up, there's only one way down. You can't actually come back down." And he was an experienced coasterer, and he knew that the tide was high at the time. I wouldn't do it. Okay, thank you, Stuart. And so, a sunny day, a lively day. You were there that day, Mark, I believe. Yeah. This was one of those storms, and this is down, that's called 𝗵𝗂𝗄𝗏, that basalt cliff there. That's at the Sandy Port in 𝗂𝗂𝗄𝗏. And I think, David, you were there as well, weren't you? Yeah, and the waves were hurtling in, smacking against the basalt, and then coming back and hitting another wave coming in, and bang. And I call that photograph The Old Man and the Sea. Because if you look at it, there's almost like a man's face there. And it's, you know, it's a part and parcel of our taking photographs and doing video, being out there, no matter what the weather. There's no inappropriate weather. What's the next line? There's only inappropriate clothing. So if you go out, mind you, yesterday I've never worn 3 coats before, which was, I looked even more like the Michelin Man yesterday than normal, but it was so cold. Okay, Stuart? Now, last Saturday night, we started working on our next video. And the idea for this next video, Portrush, Port Stuart at night time. And we want to explore the possibilities of putting together a video linking all of that together. And we've done this sort of kind of shot before. That's me driving. George is behind me in my car with a tripod, with the camera set up, with a wide-angle lens looking out of the front of the car as you drive along. And you get that Back to the Future, as in the film look, because by keeping the lens open for 6 seconds, it captures all that light coming towards you. It's quite a surreal image. So we intend to use that in the video that we hope will be out within about 10 days' time. Thank you, Stuart. And the one that John mentioned, that'll be part and parcel of it. Probably in this one, as well as any folklore that I can come up with regarding Portrush and Portstew at night time, we might talk a bit about how you get this kind of photograph. And that's not difficult to do. Again, you need a pretty wide lens to get as much of the shot in as possible. They're the tail lights of cars coming along Kerr Street and up around past Neptune and Pruan, and that's a 20-second exposure. And you press the shutter release, and it captures the red of the tail light, creating that look. So that's how that works. Okay, Stuart? That one there, I was bored at home. I'd been out for quite a few days taking photographs and wasn't happy with anything. So one Sunday evening I decided to drive down, no I didn't, I walked down to the Arcadia. And I started taking shots, and about 8 o'clock, I think the expression is foundered, isn't it? Yeah, I was quite foundered, and I was about to go home, and all of a sudden the lights of the Arcadia came on. And I thought that'll make a nice shot, and I could maybe incorporate that into the video we're going to do. There are lots of stories about the Arcadia that you obviously all know of through being young, and if you would love to appear in one of our videos and tell us about that, we'd be delighted to have you come along and do that. But that was just before, you know, is it the sycamore tree they cut down? That was just before they cut that tree down. And the photograph works, I think. If you look at the rail on the right-hand side, there's a concept in photography called a lead line. And so that is supposed to lead you into the photograph towards the subject matter. And the subject matter was the Arcadia there. So that's really how that's supposed to work. Thanks, Stuart. This is a bit of trick photography. Again, a bitterly cold night. One Sunday evening before Christmas, we went down to Lansdowne, looking out, obviously, no sign of, what are they called, 𝗖𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏, yeah, out there. And while the cameras were recording, because we had, we had 4 cameras going that evening, we used one of them to do this trick shot. Now, how you do that, basically, you set the camera up for a 25-second exposure, press the shutter release, then one of you walks into the shot and does something for about 8 seconds, and then you come back out of it. And you get that effect of this ghost image of looking through you. So, you know, we thought we'd try and include that. Okay, Stuart? Right. That's Portrush the same evening, looking out towards the causeway. That's the lights of the Royal Court to the side there. But again, we would try to include something about Portrush and that in the video. Okay. Right. That 𝗂𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗏, and you've got, that's the train above. And that is if you keep the lens of the camera open for about 3 seconds, that creates that effect of the train. And luckily at the time, there were cars coming underneath. So the combination of the two gives that effect. So if you enjoy looking at the videos we do, bit of a daft pun here, please get on board, as with the train, and please look at them, like them, and subscribe to them. What we'll do now, we'll have a look at 3 short videos, and we'll do the first one now. Okay, Stuart? The first one we actually filmed on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. We went over from here, Ballycastle, over towards the Vanishing Lake and then 𝗂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗄𝘆 Caves to try to get the video that we wanted for that. The first day it rained, then it rained, then it rained again, and then it rained once more. The second day we got lucky. I rang George up and I said, do you think we'll make it? And we did get lucky. Please have a look.
So we're trying to go and video an area called the Vanishing Lake, but the weather is absolutely terrible. Okay, so we looked at the weather forecast before we came here, and as always, it was wrong. Okay, so we're going to skip the Vanishing Lake, and we're going to head into another great location that we were going to film today. It's called the 𝗂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 Caves.
So here we are at the Vanishing Lake. If you look behind me, you can see the lake is here today. I've often driven along here and there's been no water here at all. The reason for it is that there is a sinkhole in the chalk, and after periods of prolonged rain, the peat comes down from above there and it blocks the sinkhole. It can take 4 to 6 weeks for that water to disappear. It only takes between 12 and 18 hours for the lake to appear as it is today. And if you look behind here, you see these wonderful reflections that we have today, absolutely stunning. That's all taken with the drone. That's me on piano. We were so lucky. Yeah. I must admit, I daren't fly the drone. I've flown it once. I just haven't got the confidence that George has to keep it up with it. It's wonderful, isn't it? If you look carefully, you can see all the way over to 𝗂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 there. That's so important when you are using the drone, wind. If it's really windy, it is impossible to take the drone up. We were lucky that day because the wind wasn't very strong at all. George had shot a video there a few years earlier with Mark, and I remember seeing footage of it, and Mark was in the video there, and as you're talking, Mark, if memory serves me, a sunbeam comes down and illuminates you, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, which was
very special.
Yeah, quite special indeed. Yeah, I remember that very much so. Okay, Stuart. The next one is Ballycastle, with the obligatory popping into Morton's, and staying on there and trying to do some night photography as well. So, here we go. Everybody, we're in Ballycastle today and we're walking along and we're going around this corner here to the Giant's Parlour. After that we're going to head way back round to Pan's Rocks. If you look behind me you can see Fairhead, and over there in its glory with the sun shining on it is Raffle Island. Stay with us.
Making the best fish in town.
And do you get it in every day, fresh?
Yeah.
On the boats here in Ballycastle?
Yeah. It's a fishing family business.
Going on for years and years, right?
Yeah. This is the 5th generation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Many people.
Even if I go away somewhere for the day, I'm sometimes recognised. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, for sure.
That's good, you're popular, you're famous. So we're just crossing the bridge over the River Margie. On this side we have, well, we could say the Bonamargie side of Ballycastle. And on this side we have the harbour side of Ballycastle. And we're going to head now to Pan's Rock, which is further down that way on our left-hand side towards the west. So stay tuned, stay with us.
Hey George, do you know why it's called Pan's Rocks?
Why?
Nothing to do with the Greek god Pan, but to do with the fact that there were salt pans there and they actually got salt and dried it. That's where the name comes from.
So this used to be the harbour, yeah?
Yeah, this was the inner harbour. You know where the tennis courts are in Ballycastle? The main harbour itself, where we were, where all those rocks are, originally there were wood piles there, but they were attacked by a sea worm and storm, so they replaced them with all the rocks that we saw as we walked along.
So we finally reached Pan's Rock. As you can see behind me, there's Pan Rock's Bridge. We're gonna stay here for a few hours. Hopefully the skies will clear and do some night photography.
Yeah, made it all the way. Tide's coming in, so fingers crossed we don't get cut off. We were fortunate when we got back, Morton's was still open. And Angela had kept us some fish and chips. And you know the eating area there that they have now? We ordered and went and sat in there. And Milena, she's, I think, Lithuanian. And she has a very loud voice. And she, George! Like that. And out we came. And she said, yes, Morton's the best fish and chips in England. And we said, I thought, you've come a long way with this then. And we did mean to include us having some of the fish and chips, but we forgot. We were that cold and tired, having been out for about 5 hours, more than that, and we just wanted to eat. Okay, the last one is closer to home, and this is the two of us walking from Portrush to Portstewart along the coastal path there. So Stuart, if you...
So we decided today to do the walk from Portrush all the way to Portstewart. It's about 3 miles. It'll take us about an hour and a half. We're going to start from the West Bay here at Portrush, over the cliffs, all the way to Portstewart. So stay with us because there's some great scenery coming up.
So where we're going to walk today, old school style this, can't beat an Ordnance Survey map. We're walking from Portrush to Portstewart along the port path, which is along here. Some wonderful names here, if you look, if you can see. The Old Castle Port, the Devil's Port, the Long Port, the Sycamore Port, Port Gallen, and that's where the sailor's grave is. The Holywell Port, the Stony Port, and when we get there you'll see why it's called that. Port Cool, well, yeah, need to say any more about that. And we're going to end up just here at the herring pond and above Portstewart. Not much of this left. This part of a wall is all that's left of Ballyrea Castle. In the 1550s, the 1580s, there are accounts of it being here, out towards that outcrop there. And in 1829 to 1842, when they did the OS survey of Ireland, they talked about a castle being on this site. As you can see, there's nothing left of it these days. Okay, we're at the edge of the shoreline now. Just here is Port Gallen, and if you look, you see the house there. Many years ago, there was another house on that property, a house built by a hermit called William Brown. He built it from the stones that you see in front of you and from timbers, I presume, that were washed ashore. What it's like living there on a stormy night, I don't know. It must be pretty scary, I should imagine. Today's not too bad. So we're definitely in Port Gallen now. If you look behind me there, you can see this grave of the unknown sailor. No idea who the person is, and I don't think anybody has. But the grave is still cared for, which is a really nice thing to do. Let's have a look more closely. Folks, we're about 2/3 of the way there now. There's Portrush over there. We're at Rinnegree. Rinnegree means the windy point. It's not too windy today. If you look down here, you can see the 𝗪𝗂𝗀𝗶𝗱𝗀 port. Just beyond it, unsurprisingly, that's the Stony port. So we've made it, folks. Here we are, Port Stewart Harbour, just behind me here. No red sky tonight, so no red sails in the sunset like the song. Over there's a little patch of red, but that's it. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and join us next time as we continue the exploration of this wonderful part of the world, the Causeway Coast. Thank you ever so much for watching. As I said at the end, thank you ever so much for watching. If you would like anywhere for us to feature, please, you could either let us know via that YouTube channel if you've access to YouTube via the internet, or if John wouldn't mind, you could let John know. If there's anywhere you would like us to feature, and this is a fine request to you, if you'd like to appear in one of them, please do so. It's an absolute delight for us to be able to showcase what is the wonderful part of the world, the Causeway Coast. Thank you ever so much for listening. Thank you.
Wasn't that lovely? Wasn't that marvellous? It really was a joy. The big screen, the high definition, your background experience, and that very handsome-looking guy, besides yourself, of course, George.
I do have other coats than blue, though, John, as well.
But Kenneth, thank you so much. That was a joy. Thank you.
John, can they ask where the music comes from?
Yeah.
How do you work with the music?
You have to be very careful because the copyright issue for music, you can access one or two sites that will let you use their music. One of the first videos I did, I used a song by a rock band called 𝗖cie who play rock music, and they have a track called Play Ball, and I thought this was all about Ballantoy, and I thought I'd call the video Play Ballantoy, and I put that on there, and I'm really proud of it, and it came up this has been recognised as a. Can you show it anymore? So you have to access a site that will allow you to do so cost-free.
Well, Stuart, I take it we didn't get blocked tonight then, did we? No, we're all good. Okay, so well done. Your music, that proves it. Ladies and gentlemen, we just have the raffle to do now if we can. So Claire, are you ready to... Anyone not got raffle tickets?